on this episode of Rebel Spirit Radio. It sounds like the bhakti from the Indian traditions, that blissful union and devotion to the divine. And it seems like what's fascinating is that it seems like it just erupted within you spontaneously because this was not part of the culture that you were part of.
No, it wasn't. Although I think Christian mysticism holds a tremendous amount of bhakti.
Yeah.
The devotion of traditional Christianity is powerful, and so I think the bhakti tradition is the Christian mystics and the
Yeah.
yogis have a lot in common.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, I began to, and I think this for people who have bhakti, I think that sometimes this, I didn't do it. I didn't make it happen. I met a being who was the embodiment of light, love, divine presence, something that is so beautiful that everything else is black and white comparison. If that being presents itself, if that type of presence presents itself before anyone, I don't see how anybody could feel otherwise, honestly.
Welcome to Rebel Spirit Radio, exploring the frontiers of spirituality, consciousness, the esoteric, and humanity's sacred relationship with the living earth. I'm your host, Nick Mather, and in this episode I am joined by author, spiritual teacher, and psychologist Maetreyii Ma Nolan to discuss her book, Into the Heart of the Infinite, a spiritual memoir of an extraordinary mystical journey. Maetreyii Ma discusses what led her from the suburbs of Chicago to the ashram of the Indian guru Sri Sri Anandamurthi, her experience of the dark night of the soul, and the ecstasy of becoming one with the divine. Also, please be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you use to listen to or view podcasts. Your support is truly appreciated. Maetreyii Ma is an award-winning author, psychologist, and spiritual teacher who has developed a worldwide following, bringing forth the deep wisdom that manifests to her both through her inner guru, Baba, and in her teacher, the renowned Indian mystic, Sri Sri Anandamurthi Baba. But here's where this gets really interesting. The Baba that has loved and guided her throughout her long life is the all-knowing spiritual consciousness that embodies divine love and speaks to, and in recent years, through her. And while she met and lived in the ashram of the living guru, Sri Sri Anandamurthi Baba, in India for 8 months before he passed from this earth, the immortal spiritual consciousness he embodied has been side by side with her since her college years, long before she met him and after. Her story, beautifully told in her new book, Into the Heart of the Infinite, a spiritual memoir of an extraordinary mystical journey, is a story of profound transformation that reveals how she came to experience the spiritual ecstasy and beauty that her guide, Baba, brought to her while integrating it into her real-world life of wife, mother, psychologist, and spiritual teacher, to live a life in awakened, joyful consciousness. With roles as the past founder and president of Ananda Seva Mission, a founding board member of the Kundalini Research Network, and a previous director of the Spiritual Emergence Network, she has long been a guiding light in the spiritual community. Maetreyii Ma joins me today to discuss Into the Heart of the Infinite. Maetreyii Ma, welcome to Rebel Spirit Radio.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. I very much enjoyed the book. It's been a long time since I've read a good spiritual memoir, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this today. So, you have been, I hope this is fair to say, on a spiritual journey pretty much your entire life. This started as a child, right?
Yes, it did. It started, well, really very young years with my connection to nature
Mm.
and animals and trees, and kind of went from there to my early teens, maybe between 11, 12, sometime in there, to feeling this divine spirit presence near me that I really connected with.
Mm. And that was Baba?
Well, I didn't know at that time. There was no guidance, there was no voice, there was just this presence.
Yeah.
And particularly if I was distressed about things, this presence would really come and be there. And then I felt that this was a presence that I had known for a long time, that I had known from I felt I had known this being from the past. I'd been with this being. Now, I grew up in a suburb of Chicago where,
Mm.
nobody really thinks about reincarnation. I certainly had never been introduced to that idea, but I felt I had been with this being at the past. Kids aren't always rational, though. That was my thought. And I felt this divine presence, and I almost could see this white figure next to me. And I would go out in the evenings and go for long walks with this presence. And I was so in love. This was the presence. I knew that this was the one I really loved. And I didn't really have any idea at that time what could be that. The only person or that I'd ever heard about, which was like this presence, was Jesus.
Mm.
And so at the time, after a while, there was no message of who this was. So I assumed it must be Jesus, right? Because that's the only one I'd ever known like that. But that was difficult for me because then I would cry myself to sleep thinking, oh, I'm 2,000 years too late. There's nobody like this now, and I've missed him.
Mm.
And that's how it was as a child. So now, in retrospect, I feel it was the same presence and it was Baba,
Mm.
but at that time, I thought it was Jesus because that was the only presence I knew like that. I didn't know of divine beings,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Well, and I find it so interesting that there is this Indian aspect to all of this that is coming to you as a child that, like you said, you were in the suburbs of Chicago, so you really would not have been surrounded or exposed to that all that much. I think later you were. Um, and I think later it came through your experimentation with psychedelics. So first you were a beatnik. You described yourself as a beatnik, and maybe that was where you started getting some ideas because I know that they were interested in Zen particularly. But then psychedelics, is that something that opened you up more to Indian philosophy?
It did. Well, no, not to Indian philosophy. It opened me up to consciousness.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about Indian philosophy, but I went through this mystical being, and then after a while, it sort of drifted away like things do from your childhood, and I got social and extroverted, and my life became people and, friends and things that teenagers do. And then I got towards the latter part of high school into being a beatnik, right? So I would read Allen Ginsberg and, wear black turtlenecks. And I had my long hair. I'd straighten my hair so that, and then I got into, I sort of went out of that phase. And I had long ago, I think I'd become more of an agnostic by that
Mm.
time. I'd gone to different churches and I didn't feel it there. So
Right.
it sort of, God became dead to me. And I was pursuing having fun
Mm.
and friends and connections and boyfriends and the kind of things that teenagers pursue. And then I became a hippie. And by my second year in college, I dropped in and dropped out. And well, I was still in college, but
Right.
I became a part of the alternative world of hippiedom at that time. And I went to Southern Illinois University, which was in the middle of nowhere, but it had a good hippie culture. And, drugs were part of it. And someone gave me some LSD one day, and I said, sure, why not? So I took it, and I had a very profound experience of the unity of all life. And I think what LSD did is that presence that I felt as a child, that divine being, now suddenly I was experiencing on psychedelic the
Mm.
unity of life. And where where I would look at a leaf and I would go into the molecular universe, and I would go out into the cosmos, and they would just kind of meld together, and all life would just sort of come into this, unity, stillness, love, whatever you call it. And then I began to take LSD on a regular basis. I got a psychedelic experience in my hands. Timothy Leary was my guru at that point.
Right.
I didn't know the word guru, but he was the one I looked to for my journey of consciousness. And I saw LSD not as a fun thing, but as a delving into consciousness, with each trip going deeper and deeper into this realm of consciousness. And what happened to me is, as I was continuing to take LSD, the consistently time would slow down. I think one trip was at least a lifetime long. It definitely added subjective years to my life. And and the time would slow down, things would come more and more into unity. And as time would continue to slow, there would be a unity that happened with everything in the universe. And I would feel this unitary whole and the bliss of being part of the universe, part of the wholeness of it all. And it was very powerful. And each trip was going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then one day I took LSD, and these are the kind of trips, a lot of times you're just laying on the bed, they weren't the running around doing things, although some of it was. There especially this last trip was so deep. I went into that unitary wholeness and sank into that, where time slows down and slows down and slows down until it stopped. And there was this point of light that it's like it pierced a veil, and time began to stand still. I guess moving just a little, I saw this light like move across a kind of void and pierce another veil. And when it pierced that veil, there was this huge realization that I had created all of this within me, the entire universe, all the stars and galaxies and everything, and they just folded into themselves and were gone. And there was just be something between being and non-being. And then I don't remember. And then I came back into this slowed time and unitary whole, but I felt there was a contradiction, because I had gone outside of this, and why was I here again, and I came back to my normal everyday state of consciousness. But I knew that LSD was a closed door that had opened and had closed. But it wasn't easy to take no for an answer, because I didn't know how to get back there, and
Right.
what life without that,
Yeah.
Once you're experiencing something like that, it's so profound. I just wanted to get back to experience it. But LSD was a closed door. I tried a few more times, didn't work out. Got a lot of panic attacks. Not a good situation. And I think I go into that book about the spiral down and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that opened to meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I wanted to ask you about, it seems like you went through a sort of dark night of the soul after that experience.
I very much did. I think what happened is that I had no guide. I had nothing. What did I know? I was early 20s, 21, 22, and I lived in Southern Illinois, and this was not the reality folks were talking about. And so I had no help. And I think what happened is that, and what was causing the fear, was that I really went into the existential void. So when when I tried to take LSD again, I found myself standing on that precipice with the void in front of me. And it became the experience of the existential void. At that time, I certainly couldn't have analyzed this. It's only my own experience and reflection and the work I've done, that now I can understand the psychology of what happened. And that in that existential void, there's a fundamental, I had gone deep enough that there was a fundamental breakdown of the substantialness of this world.
Mm.
So I would hug my husband and I would feel he's made of bone and flesh, and it's not solid. It doesn't hold my being. And I found that the world was not solid and couldn't hold my being, which is really an existential state. And so it threw me from this divine bliss and unity to existential terror of the void. And that certainly had a big impact on my life. I didn't understand it. I had no idea what I was going through. I felt a failure, you know.
Mm.
I miss that love so much, you know. I just wanted to be in divine union. I didn't want to be stuck in this duality. It was very depressing
Yeah.
and
So,
scary.
was it beginning a meditation practice that helped pull you out of that?
Definitely. It was, yeah, I started to rally. I got into meditation. There's a lot of experiences, as you know, and if you read the book, and then I began to have mystical experiences again in meditation. And that's when I met Baba internally. I was very afraid of having any kind of unusual experiences, you know. So I started have I stopped meditating at one point because I started having unusual experiences, and I didn't see other people having unusual experiences, and I'd had this bad experience with LSD. So I thought, oh God, I better not meditate. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. And so I stopped meditating, and then I began meditation again cautiously. And we had this beautiful meditation room in the house we had, and so many things had converged in these sort of mystical convergences that were happening at that, synchronicities that were
Mm.
happening at that time. And we had this farm, 1,000 acres in southern Illinois, and beautiful, quiet place. And we had this beautiful meditation room. And I would do these meditations twice a day, and they were all going well, and nothing weird happened. I felt peaceful when I came out of meditation. So it was all good, right? And I meditated for months that way. And then one day when I finished meditation, I realized that I had I had been hearing this voice, not only in this meditation, but for months, and I just hadn't remembered it. And so I heard this voice, and it was this being who spoke with such love and compassion. It was again like that divine being of my childhood. This was the love of my life. This was the Sadguru, the divine presence in my life. And I was madly in love. But, you know, I was 21, 22, or whatever. I can't quite remember. But I thought, nobody listens to voices in their head except for crazy people.
Right.
You know, that's all I'd ever heard of. So I'm going, oh, what am I doing? But I was so in love that I couldn't stop it. You know, I just went,
Mm.
maybe I'm crazy, but I'm in love. This being is more beautiful than anything in this world. It's amazing. And so then I began a series of mystical experiences around so it was meditation that brought me to Baba.
Mm.
It wasn't meditation that really stirred me. It was what meditation brought me to,
Mm.
which was divine presence.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like the bhakti from the Indian traditions, that blissful union and devotion to the divine. And it seems like what's fascinating is that it seems like it just erupted within you spontaneously, because this was not part of the culture that you were part of.
No, it wasn't. Although I think Christian mysticism holds a tremendous amount of bhakti.
Yeah.
The devotion of traditional Christianity is powerful,
Mm.
you know. And so I think the bhakti tradition is the Christian mystics and the
Yeah.
yogis have a lot in common.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so, yeah, I began to, and I think this for people who have bhakti, I think that sometimes this, I didn't do it. I
Mm,
didn't make it happen. I met a being who was the embodiment of light, love, divine presence, something that is so beautiful that everything else is black and white
mm,
comparison. If that being presents itself, if that type of presence presents itself before anyone, I don't see how anybody could feel otherwise,
mm.
honestly.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something I did, it's something that I encountered.
Mm, mm. S-
Perhaps ways.
Yeah. So you began this meditation practice. You started having these incredible experiences of Baba, and now at this point, Baba is more of a figure, whereas when you were younger, I think you described it as just kind of a whitish light. Is that right?
Yeah, I felt this presence, but there were no words, there was
Mm,
no teaching, there was
right.
no, yeah, there was no description, no name.
Okay.
Now it had given me a name,
Mm,
and there was much more of a presence.
okay.
And the Baba claimed to be the same as my physical guru, Sri Sri Anandamurti.
Okay. And so that's what led you to Anandamurti is the and you had never heard of him before?
I had been, before, the way I got into meditation is a monk came to Southern Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
nowhere, and talked about meditation, and I took initiation into that practice that he was teaching, and so that was a practice I was doing.
Right, right.
I I didn't have a strong idea of about the guru. There was
Mm,
this Dada, this monk,
mm,
orange robed Swami, but after a while I became more aware of the presence. And then when Baba came to me internally, he said his name was Baba. And then after some very deep mystical experiences, he told me to go to India and be with him in physical form.
mm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you left that wonderful farmhouse.
yeah,
So
beautiful.
so you went to India to be with Sri Sri Anandamurti.
Yeah.
And we don't want to go into every single thing in the book because we want to encourage people to read the book. But talk a little bit about that. And I want to just kind of lay the general groundwork, but I do have a couple questions for you in regards to your experience there. So, you noted that, much of your personal experience was with the inner guru, but now you had the outer guru.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what was the process? How did things start changing or shifting for you once you got to India?
Well, when I first got to India, and I first was in darshan. Darshan means sight of the guru. Basically, he gives a talk. And I was there. Every thought you'd never want to think in around a being who you knew could read your mind was rising to the surface like some toxic cleansing. And it was terrible. And it wasn't at all like, oh, now I found Baba out here. It was like, oh my God, this is awful, you
Mm,
know. And I went through that for a week or two, and then I began to feel a clearing of that and the presence that was there. And you know, it's my firm understanding that all divine beings are one being. All life is one whole. There's only one guru, one infinite divine self. But there's flavors, right?
mm,
Just like you don't look like me, I don't look like you. So there's flavors to life.
mm,
And and Anandamurti Baba was the same flavor. It wasn't vanilla, it was chocolate,
Mm. Yeah.
like that. It was the same flavor as the inner Baba.
Mm.
I found this unity of vibratory unity, I would say.
Mm.
Um, I don't think it was a reflection that the inner Baba was a projection of the man. I
Right.
think the man embodied the same presence
Mm.
that was coming to me.
Mm. The
Not
way I read it was that it was almost like a like the same consciousness.
the same consciousness, but the consciousness, this is something I really want to talk about in a little bit, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about guru, I think.
Mm-hmm.
People think that guru is a person out there who
Right.
has some cosmic abilities and can therefore read your mind and teach you, and if you have a positive experience of guru, it's like that. But then there's the feeling that guru originates in that body.
Mm.
Whereas my experience is that guru is infinite consciousness,
Right.
and guru embodies in a person who is connected to that, and guru embodies in the inner manifestation, the self of yourself, and whatever mystical form that chooses to embody or take for you, you know and it's not necessarily according to your belief systems. There's, like, the woman who wrote the Course in Miracles
Mm.
had Jesus come to her. That wasn't her belief system, right?
Right.
So you never know what it's going to be like. But I felt that, and so I felt Anandamurti Baba. My Baba didn't come out of Anandamurti. It's like Anandamurti is,
Mm.
and was embodied in that physical person of P.R. Sarkar, which is a worldly name, and
Mm.
in this manifestation that I felt.
Mm.
And they were the same. And then many talks, I would just feel that Baba was talking just to me, and that he'd say things that my Baba would bring up, and then Baba and Nandamurti would talk about them.
Mm.
And that was very deep for me. I might share one of those experiences, and that was that when I was in Southern Illinois and Baba had first come to me, and I was feeling kind of, half of the time I'm just in love and it's
Mm.
beautiful, and half of the time I'm kind of like, I think I'm going crazy. I'm
Mm.
listening to inner voices. And that's much more acceptable today than it was
Mm.
back then in Southern Illinois. And I, he's, I, he said something to me to sort of, he said, I am your Kula guru. And I went,
Mm.
hey, I know Sanskrit, how do you spell it? So he spelled it for me. And so I went to the university, and I looked up at Sanskrit dictionary to look up Kula guru to see if it was really a word, right? And it was a word. However, it said it meant sheep herder, and I went,
Mm.
sheep herder? What is that? Why is he telling me he's my Kula guru? He says sheep herder, you know. And so it's kind of, anyway. So I was a little bit. At least it was a word. I was happy
Right.
it was a word.
Right.
And then when I was in India, one of in the early part of seeing Baba, maybe 3 weeks down the line, he gave this talk, and the entire talk was devoted to talking about the Kula Guru.
Mm.
And he said, the Kula Guru is the guru of the Kula Kundalini, who works with the Kula Kundalini and the Kundalini process in your body, as well as also the Kula Guru is your family guru. Um, and so he went into a whole talk about it and explained everything that had not been explained, that, from what I'd been told earlier. And that was very helpful. Things like that happened a lot,
Mm.
where there
Mm.
was one and another.
Yeah. I think that maybe we want to take a step back just for a moment.
Oh,
And I want to ask you about Anandamurti, the man. For anyone who is not familiar, who has never heard of Anandamurti, if you could maybe say a few words about who he was.
Yeah, he grew up in Bengal. I think he was born in 1921, if I have that right. And his name was Prabhat, and I think he was called Arun when he was young. And when he was about 5 years old, he was walking in the forest, and a white light came in front of him, a beam of sort of a beam of white light, and he stepped into and he asked it, "Who are you?" And the white light said, "I am Sri Sri Anandamurthi." And then the white light came into him. He merged in the white light, and at that time, I guess he became enlightened. I don't know. He became Anandamurti.
Mm.
Sort of a walk-in, if you will.
Yeah.
But similar to what has happened with other gurus who
Mm.
come into this very early in life, I think have somewhat interesting stories that may be similar. And then he began teaching by his 20s, and he he was known to do various miraculous things like be giving talks in one place and be seen 500 miles an hour away at another place visiting a family and at the same time. And he really did know what everyone was thinking. And he really was. I saw a lot of miraculous things around him. He really was a very cosmological being. And he also had a Prout and neo-humanism, which were more philosophies that dealt with political and economic and hum, humanism extended to all beings.
Mm.
Um, and he started an organization called Ananda Marga.
Mm.
Everyone knows that.
The way of bliss, right?
Yeah, the path of bliss. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, can you say maybe a little bit about the teachings of Nandamurti? What are some of the core teachings that you were exposed to while at the ashram?
Yes, the system of meditation I learned is called Sahaj Yoga, and there are other systems of Sahaj Yoga, but Sahaj means natural state of being, and this is a Baba's spiritual teachings combined classical North Indian Tantra. That's not sexual Tantra, but that's classical North
Right.
Indian Tantra, and which has got similarities to Tibetan Buddhism. I think they're both northern tantras, and combined that with the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga to make his system of practices.
Mm.
And it's a very good system, and a lot of people go very deep with it. And then he also gave neo-humanism, which is a philosophy that says that humanism is extended to animals and plants, and that all living beings are important. All living beings are an embodiment of divine being, and to treat all living beings with honor and respect, and care.
Mm.
And he also gave Prout progressive utilization theory, which was his political economic theory, which espoused local economic autonomy. And progressive utilization means that everyone should have their basic needs met, and everyone should have the ability to realize their potential in life.
Mm.
And that this shouldn't be denied to anybody, that there should be a universal attribution, so that on one hand there is a sort of globalism, but on the other hand there's local economy.
Mm.
And he gave this as a progressive way of a new paradigm for socioeconomic development.
Mm. Yeah, and he was very much opposed to the caste system in India, which I think technically was illegal, but still very much at play.
Very much, yes. So
Yeah.
he fought against the caste system. He encouraged intercaste marriages.
Mm.
Um, he did, at one point in the early 70s, Ananda Marga was very large. There were
Mm.
probably several million people in it. And he really, I think, had an influence in the ideas that he brought forward. which were, he wasn't really Hindu, you know.
Yeah.
He didn't espouse dogma
Mm.
and religion per se in a dogmatic way. He espoused spirituality and personal inner spiritual growth along with social consciousness, I would say. He also was very much against the, well, it's your karma that's
Mm.
happening to you, so therefore it's your problem,
Right. Yeah.
you've created that. So,
Okay.
he was not into that philosophy, which in, I think got at a certain levels at certain times in India very prominent, that people would dismiss the suffering of whole classes of people because it was their karma,
Right.
you know, is a little bit of a twist of the theory of karma, as you probably know.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems to instill sometimes almost a passivity in the sense of, well, it's my karma, so there's nothing I can really do about it, at
Right.
least in this lifetime.
Or I
Um,
don't care about you because it's your karma.
yeah, yeah. So this did not befriend him to the powers that be in India, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
He at that time in India, the Communist Party was very much in control.
Hmm.
And or not in, I don't know if they were in control. I never fully understood Indian politics, but something about, they were very prominent, and they didn't like Prout,
Hmm.
and so he became targeted. There was some infiltration into the organization. Different difficult things happened, and Nanda Marga was banned by Indira
Hmm.
Gandhi as an organization. So there was all of that, and people were put in prison. And actually, I was there just as that was happening. I was living in India for close to a year, and I was there just as that was happening. And in fact, we would have been, if we would have applied for an exit visa, which we didn't know we
Right.
need of, we would have been arrested. So they were just arresting people. We were there to be connected to a divine being, and
Right.
to for meditation. But there was this whole political drama going on, and I think Ananda Marga was one of 5
Hmm.
organizations. Am I right? That was banned, something like that. Anyway, it was a drama that happened in Indian culture and Indian society,
Right.
and many people that I knew in Ananda Marga were imprisoned.
Yeah.
And they meditated in prison. They actually handled it really well.
Yeah. 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 Well, historically speaking, they're in good company. That happens a lot. So, as progressive as Anantamurti was, there was a little bit of, I don't want to say a conflict, but there was an issue that kind of you had to face, and that was the treatment of women. Because women were set off to the side at his talks during darshan, and that bothered you.
Yeah. It also bothered my inner Baba,
Yeah.
who guided me to rebel against that.
Hmm.
It, yeah, it did bother me, but he was not out of the context of his culture and his time.
Right.
When I came to Patna, it was very much like that. I think I point out in the book that the men were college educated and the women were illiterate.
Yeah.
If a woman came in the presence of a man, she held a veil over her head, and it was considered seductive if she looked at a man. So she
Mm.
had to look down at the ground. I was shocked. I
Yeah.
was not prepared for that. My inner guide did not prepare me for that. And so that was quite a shock. And then I couldn't have a personal contact with Baba like the men did because I was a woman. And I went, wait a minute, because
Mm.
I had this inner connection, and what am I being barred for? How can this be? And so I I received guidance to rebel against a lot of it, and I did. I followed that guidance, which was scary,
Mm.
but I did, and other Westerners who were staying at the ashram followed suit. And one time, Baba came in to give his darshan, and before he came in, the guards there were, excuse me, telling people to move to their respective seats, and the women were over on the side. And Baba told me, "Stay where you are. don't move, don't move. So because I'd usually come in and meditate for a few hours, just sit there and meditate in front of the choki, the stand on which he sat. And he's saying to me, don't move. And the guard is getting really upset. And I'm just meditating, and he's raising the stick above his head. He's going to hit me. And Baba says, don't move. And the other men grabbed the guard. And then Baba's walking in the door, so they all had to sit down. And there I am right in front of Baba, and the next day it came an announcement from the central office that the Western women could sit in front in the section. So that was a sort of inner guide, outer guide relationship. Baba wanted it changed.
Yeah. Well, it's sometimes really difficult to change a culture like that, and you have to do it slow and incrementally. And it makes sense. It would be easier for Western, to say, okay, well, the Western women can do this, as if, well, they're just used to it.
Yeah. And the Indian women really didn't want to be disturbed. They were defensive of their own position, actually. That's what they knew.
Okay. All right. So you were in the ashram with Anandamurthi for about a year, and you returned to the United States. It was after his arrest. Is that correct?
It was, yes.
Okay. And did that bring you into another dark night of the soul?
No, not at that time.
Okay.
What it did is it brought me into, I missed him, but it brought me into, I call it in the book, the long years between.
Okay.
When I, had a family, went back to school and got my PhD, went from meditating 10 hours a day to barely even getting a half an hour because I had little kids and I was in school and working and, and at that point seeing many different gurus because Baba wasn't available. And so I was just going wherever I could, but Baba was always my guru and I always had my inner connection. But that was a sort of a practical learning experience.
Right. Yeah. I had a list going of some of the other gurus that you had gone to see, Baba Hari Das, Mother Mira, Amma. I think some people may know her as the hugging guru. So that was pretty remarkable that you have this conversation coming from India into the United States and the rest of the Western world at this time, and you were kind of there on the forefront of it all.
Yeah, my husband and I, Liam and I, we just hung out around many different people. Tarthang Toku, Sister Pama, who was at that time, and that she was also a noted nun in Buddhism. So we both were, hanging around Tibetan Buddhists, Guru Bawa, who was this Sufi Bhakti type of being, and all these different beings. We just spent many years doing that. And it was during that time between 1970 and 1980, 1990, when, all these Eastern gurus were coming through. And we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, and, they came through. And we were sort of on the network of gurus and kirtans and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Now, did you show up in the San Francisco area upon your return from India?
Actually, I went back to Chicago at first and lived there. We started an ashram in Chicago. I was really grieving missing Baba. And then some friends of ours from India invited us to come to Palo Alto, California, to start a school called Renaissance School and for children. And we went, because I felt isolated there. And now I'd be around other people who were Baba devotees and stuff. And so that was great. So that brought us out to California.
Okay. Yeah. I read the book. Sometimes I don't remember everything. But San Francisco is the perfect place for that kind of spirituality.
Yeah, it was in those days, there was really a lot. And plus we were living in households of Baba devotees and there was a lot of meditation and, it was it's how we kept it up.
Yeah.
But then we had kids and it was very busy, and I think it was part of the divine flow of switching from this immersion in spirituality that I had had, and this passionate love for God, to having uh, really to sort of be there, raising
Mm.
kids, going to school, working,
Yeah.
getting my degree as a psychologist, and just being really in the world. And
Yeah.
at the same time, seeing all these gurus and,
Yeah. Yeah.
meditating as I could.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the challenge in a sense is we have to come back into the world, and various philosophies and spiritual teachings always talk about that, we can't stay blissed out. We have to come back into the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
It is. But then I after that, I had more mystical experiences, and I really, that was a training ground coming back in the
Mm,
world. I think there really is something to that. But I was still learning, and
mm,
I I feel now I'm in the world very much, but in a very different way,
mm,
because there's a melding together. In the non-dual perspective of feeling the integrated whole of everything, that everything is one, and everything of this manifestation is the one, which I've, even on LSD back then and all that, I saw that, but then to bring it into your daily life, that it is part of your everyday, that you are living in divine presence in this world, and that there isn't a duality between
right.
divine bliss and divine presence and the world that I experienced when I was younger, that duality. And I think the big journey for me in life, and it's a life journey, is to bridge that gap
Mm,
and to find the divine, not only in the bliss of cosmic presence, but that every, my cat sitting in my lap is being with the divine being, right? The
mm,
divine being is embodied as a cat.
mm,
If we, for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear,
here.
the babbling brook, the
Yeah.
robin singing, give the
Mm,
messages of God.
yeah. 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 And it's interesting that you ended up in transpersonal psychology because my understanding, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but my understanding is one of the primary reasons that discipline emerged was because people were having these sorts of unitary experiences and mystical experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the forefront leaders like Tony Sunich and Stan Groff and the other people who were formed the idea of transpersonal psychology began to see that psychology that just deals with the ego mind and deals only with the psychophysical isn't at all complete, because we do have a transcendent aspect to our being. And that, of course, I think that knowledge came a lot really out of the LSD and the psychedelic era of the 60s and 70s that brought that consciousness forward, and people had a lot of non-duality experiences through that, and then meditation and all the mystical experiences, the things coming from the East, and then that integrated with some of the early, like Jung and some of the
Mhm.
early people who had brought transpersonal earlier. And so they gave a name to it, transpersonal psychology, and it really began to integrate these higher level consciousness experiences with the ego self and the what was humanism and the other movements in psychology before the transpersonal movement. But the transpersonal was always there. Jung was transpersonal,
Yeah, yeah,
Assagioli was transpersonal.
yeah, yeah. I actually had one of the quotes that I had pulled out from your book. Let me see if I can find it. And it may have been when you were talking about the writing about the guru, but oh yeah, yeah. This there was a deeper person within me. 4 or 5 times in my life, the same deeper persona has come to the surface. It feels like an old unconscious soul. I think there was a typo there, forgive me. That is a conglomerate of all my lives, one who has lived long enough to be fairly awake, not a soul asleep from life to life. And when I read that, Jung came to mind and his experience with, he named it Philemon, I think, that he had that inner guide that spoke to him as well.
Wow, I didn't know that about Young.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Much of the Red Book is conversations between him and Philemon.
Is it
Uh,
really? Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Philemon was his inner guide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what came to my mind when I read that Baba, was kind of like that in a sense, and that there is precedence for it. There's definitely
Wow.
precedence. So,
Yeah.
are you able to? And forgive me if this is not a good question. I can, but I'm curious if all of these experiences that you've had, I would imagine that people who have similar experiences and are kind of lost and confused then can come to you for help.
Yes, they can.
Yeah.
And I ran the Spiritual Emergence Network, which was Stan and Christina Groff started, and it was at ITP for a while, which was my transpersonal psychology school. Uh, but it has to do with people who have non-ordinary states of consciousness and mystical experiences really need support, and I wish I'd have had it.
Yeah.
But uh, I try to offer that for people who need it.
Yeah.
And I have a mentoring program for people who want to study with me. And I also work as a psychologist, and I particularly like to work with people who are having these psycho-spiritual
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. So you came back into the world. Mother got a degree, got to work, but you ended up going back to India.
Yeah, because started having mystical experiences again that were very deep and very profound. Even though I had young children, I was like spending every spare moment meditating, and Baba was became so strong, and I began to experience this light in my body, and all sorts of different mystical experiences happened. And I knew that Baba was going to die. He showed me that his physical form would be leaving. And I wanted to go to India, but he didn't want me to go when he was physically there. He said it just wouldn't be appropriate. He guided me to that I wouldn't have liked it because he was surrounded by so many people, and it would have been I wouldn't have felt good being a face in the crowd. And so the inner connection is too deep. And so then when he left his body, he said, "Now you can come to India, be with me physically." And so I went to India for his Shraddha ceremony, which is the cremation ceremony. And so I was there for that, and I had very deep experiences there, and a very hard experience, and that led to a true dark night of the soul.
Mm.
I had a very hard experience in that suddenly I was receiving guidance from Baba that he had left this Guru Shakti, whatever that was, with me, and that he wanted me to teach and to allow his flow of energy to come through. He said, "This is in seed form now, but it will grow and manifest." And I went, "No, experiences like this don't happen to people like me. I'm just an ordinary person." And also his death really affected me. I really
Mm.
deeply grieved. And even though I hadn't been around him in 20 years as a physical person, somehow him physically leaving the planet very deeply affected me, as did this idea that I was supposed to, there was this Guru Shakti, whatever, I didn't know really what that meant. And I just rebelled about the idea. I thought, okay, I must be stressed by all of this, and therefore I'm having some psychological delusions or something. And I just wouldn't accept it.
Mm.
And so I went through a struggle with that, a very deep and personal and difficult struggle, which I go into in my book.
Mm-hmm.
And that was truly a dark night of the soul. But I came out of that eventually with the realization that I had to accept it. I had to accept what he was saying, even though I saw no proof of it at that time. But then it did come about that this flow started, and these teachings came, and then I spent a very long time doing that.
Yeah. And so the teachings are, is this what the Baba talks?
Yeah, the Baba talks. Yeah, I call them Baba talks because it's me. It's not channeled per se,
Mm,
there's not another person I'm channeling, but it's me sort of melting back into my divine guide,
mm,
and then feeling that, just melting into the whole, and then just feeling that knowledge that doesn't come from the intellect, but comes from a place of cosmic knowingness, and
mm.
just feeling that talk through me and come through me. And I give those talks. And yeah, I call them Baba talks because I feel like Baba talking.
Mm.
It's my Baba, my internal guide
Right.
going through to the
Yeah.
outer world.
Yeah. So the internal Baba is always with you.
Yeah. I think that cosmic
Yeah.
presence is always with everyone.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I have a certain kind of connection, I would say.
Yeah. And I guess that's one of the questions is it seems like, I don't want to say you were chosen, but in a sense, it almost seems kind of like, you were definitely led along the path. But what about uh, an average, an ordinary person? Not saying that
I'm
you're not, yeah, that's what I was just saying. Not that you're not ordinary, but, for anyone else, the, this journey you've been on, the spiritual journey that you've been on, you know, for people who haven't been called, but yet they want these sort of spiritual experiences, what would you say to that? How would you?
I think the mystical is within each of us.
Mm,
It really is. If if your mind is distracted, out doing a bunch of things in the outer world, at that moment, your consciousness, your awareness is in all of that. It's not in the inner and the mystical.
mm,
So you need a way to bring yourself back into the inner and the mystical. And normally meditation is the path.
mm,
But meditation, not just, I would say, being simply present in the moment, maybe, but meditation that brings you to the deeper aspects of your heart, where there is a deep connectedness to all life, an connectedness to life, and a connectedness in love to everything in the universe. And and so through meditating deeply, the unitary nature of your own being, on the love that binds all life, and on that cosmic grace and consciousness, you can bring yourself in connection with it.
mm,
And I also feel that the connection is natural, and it bleeds through in life for everyone in
mm,
one moment or another. And some people more than others, because maybe they pay a little more attention to it, maybe due to whatever they just have more of a natural inclination. And so if some people, it's being out in nature,
mm,
and they see the mountains and the sky, or they see the beauty of nature, and there's that moment, this
mm.
moment is eternal, the moment where you feel that unity, you feel awe, you
Yeah.
feel ah, right?
Mm,
And sometimes it's with a loved one, that you look into somebody's eyes, and there's not two, there's one. All the dualities go away, and there you are. So both of those experiences, and it may be in other ways for people. I think that for Einstein and some great scientists, it came in those moments when their concentration on what they're studying has become so intense
mm,
that they break through, you know?
mm,
Whatever brings you out of the dream
mm.
into the true reality of being, into the that which is. we have these moments, and meditation, deep meditation, is a practice to allow you to cultivate what's in those moments, cultivate the quietness of mind, the withdrawal from all of that
Yeah.
stuff that the mind's normally, to sink in deep
Yeah.
and to cultivate that love, cultivate that connectedness and divine presence. And
Yeah.
I think it's possible for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, what I like about everything that you just said is this idea that we are in this world that is constantly demanding our attention, but that's kind of the dream world. There is a truer foundation to our being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's, you know, we tend to want to revert to, because we live in physical bodies, it's
Hmm.
understandable. We tend to want to revert to the physical
Yeah.
as the most solid. But we even know from quantum physics that
Yeah.
isn't the most solid, you know?
Right.
But we want to feel it, we want to see it as the most solid. And I think what was terrifying to me after those LSD experience, in that experience of the, I would say, the existential void, is a recognition that this isn't solid.
Hmm.
And unless you know of something more solid, it's real scary, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but there is something more solid. And, even newer quantum physicists are saying consciousness is the base of the universe, not
Hmm.
matter.
Right.
And there's 400 years of thinking that matter is the basis of the universe, and now we're moving into just beginning to understand consciousness as the base of the universe. So consciousness, beingness, that pull which we feel as love, that pull of the infinite, is that cosmic substance is is a solid base.
Hmm.
And our spirit, when we leave these bodies, is still connected to that base. These bodies ground us in the material, but the material isn't here forever.
Yeah. Isn't that the Sanskrit Satchitananda?
Yes, yes. Bliss,
Yeah. Yeah.
consciousness, truth,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
reality.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that exactly what you were just saying is we seem to be undergoing a pretty profound shift in terms of science and spirituality and a lot of other things. People are leaving traditional churches in droves because I think that there's something, it's too much dogma, not enough spirit. But yet where the science is taking us seems to be very consistent. I've often said, I teach, philosophy. We have to talk about consciousness, and I look at it from the Western point of view, and I'm like, but all you have to do is go look at India, because they've been talking about this for centuries, and it seems like the teachings are now more relevant than ever.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're more accessible to the West
Mm.
and more accessible to a wider range of people. And I also, what one of the some of the guidance that I get is that we're in a process of transition
Mm.
into a time of more consciousness, more light,
Mm.
more awareness. And one of the things in that kind of transition, of course, is any kind of transformation requires a deconstruction
Mm.
as well as a reconstruction. And so you see polarity forming. One thing Baba said, in fact, in a New Year's talk, is when the light gets brighter, the shadow becomes more distinct,
Yeah.
easier to see. And so that's the natural process of more light coming in the world. I know a lot of people have a sort of doomsday feeling that, oh my
Mm.
God, it's so bad, there's no way out.
Right.
But the guidance I get is that we will rally. We
Mm.
will we will come into we're in a process of transformation to a higher level of consciousness, to a more awakened state collectively.
Mm.
And in that process, we're in that process.
Yeah, we are. And I've been doing the podcast for a few years now, and this is a theme that keeps coming up over and over and over. And I usually look at it through more of a shamanic kind of point of view, that we are undergoing an initiation. And part of that
Yes.
initiation, that initiatory process, is for traditionally in the shamanic traditions, is a dismemberment, and then we have to remember ourselves. And that's what I see over and over in all these conversations. It's the same thing that keeps coming up, said in different ways. But in a sense, we have to remember who we are. And
That's,
from the Baba's teachings, who we are is divine.
that's right. That's right. In our deepest, and I think that's something to remember. A lot of us have trouble with self-esteem, or
Mm,
you don't always feel good about yourself. But to remember that in your deepest level of your being, you are, you are, it is only love. It's
mm,
only divine being which is most beautiful, most precious, lies within you and within all beings.
mm,
But it's within you, and that you're even the darkest person who does the worst things in the world, within their core is
mm,
that pure light,
mm.
is that pure love. They're just disconnected from it
Yeah, yeah.
in their own, their conscious awareness is disconnected from it. But
Mm,
if they would have the opportunity, they could come back to it.
yeah.
But but we get led into other things.
Yeah. Well, it's that dream, right? The what they Maya, and we often I hear people say all the time, well, this is the real world that you have to focus on, and it's like, but is it really?
Good
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
questioned.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I appreciate the hopefulness that you're bringing here. And my understanding is that Anandamurti was pretty hopeful as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
always saw the future as bright.
yeah, good.
You know, but that doesn't mean there's not a little
Yeah. Oh
struggle
yeah,
along the
yeah. Well, there's always going to be darkness, there's always going to be the struggle, but that's necessary on the journey, I think.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
All right.
And I also think that's necessary on the spiritual journey.
Mm,
In my book, I do talk about my struggles as well as
yeah.
the mystical things that have happened. And I don't think, when we really come to walk the spiritual path and to really want to know our deepest self, there is, by definition, struggle.
Mm,
There's there we You can't know yourself until you're willing to look at yourself.
right.
And as you do that, your shadow comes out in life.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
fears, your struggles, and yeah, that's part of the journey. But it's not bad. It's just the journey.
Yeah. Well, and you note this a couple of times in the book, and this also is, I think, very consistent with Carl Jung. And so once you wrote, opening to the full nature of our divine essence requires us to face our inner demons and look at our shadow side with complete honesty and self disclosure.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that we're at a pretty good place to start wrapping this up. Is there anything that I missed in terms of the book that you would like the audience to know? I'll ask you where they can get it in a
Okay.
minute.
No, I think that kind of sums it up.
Okay, good. So where can people get a copy of the book?
Well, right now they can get it by going to your local bookstore and asking for it. It will be sold through bookstores. It's new right now, but you can ask for it. Or you can go on Amazon and look up Into the Heart of the Infinite. It's on Amazon.com. And I do have it on sale for a few more weeks for 99 cents for the digital copy.
Oh, okay.
And, just because it's brand new and I'm
Right, right.
up for people and reviews and stuff. And yeah, and I will have it on my website, but it isn't there yet. It will be there
Okay.
shortly.
All right. And what's your website?
My website is yogama.info.
Okay.
That's YOGAMA.info.
All right.
Yogama.info.
Okay. And we're doing this kind of in the reverse of how I normally do this, but what do you have coming up?
I have a weekly meditation on, but it's live.
Okay.
It's not online on Sundays, and then I do have a satsang meditation on and Baba talk on Monday mornings.
Okay.
Um, but I think I will soon, if there's interest, start another one that will be
Mm.
more for people who are just getting to know the Baba talks and things.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I think that the meditation trainings would be incredibly helpful because I think that meditation is having its moment, I think, in our culture, but it's
Yeah.
also being kind of co-opted a little bit by corporations
Yes, it
to
is.
just make, it's like, oh, well, you can do this to be more proficient. And, you hear mindfulness, but meditation is so much more than that.
Yes, and this I do really want to say something about, because there is so much focus on mindfulness meditation, and
Mm,
not that there's anything wrong with it. It's
right.
great. But there is so much more to meditation than
Mm,
just being mindful.
yeah.
There is, you can mindfully pick up your cup and mindfully read a book and mindfully do things. That's great. And you can mindfully be aware of your body and your mind, and that's great. But there is a deeper aspect to your being, and there's meditation to connect you to that deeper aspect of your being. And I think eventually through mindfulness you might come to that other type of meditation, but also, in addition to the mindfulness, it might be good to learn some classical meditation to bring you to the connection to your soul, the
Mm,
connection to your divine essence. So that, and I do teach the meditation. That's part of my mentoring, is to teach meditation. So
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's very important. I think it's incredibly important. We need that, not just the mindfulness. Like you said, it's incredibly important and helpful, but there's just so much more to meditation than that.
yeah, there is so much more.
Yeah.
There's a depth that you can go to that can be deeply, deeply transforming and profound.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Do you, I know we're ending here, but do you incorporate meditation in your therapy as well?
I teach it to some people. It depends on a person's desires, what they
Okay.
want.
Okay.
Yes, I usually actually end up teaching people.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Okay, well, I think that this is a good place to end. Maetreyii Ma, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this opportunity to speak with you, and I very much enjoyed the book. So I
Oh,
encourage people to get a copy of it and read it. And there's a lot of wisdom, and it's an interesting, fascinating story.
thank you. It's been wonderful to be here with you. This has been great.
And that's a wrap on episode 124 of Rebel Spirit Radio. Thank you so much for listening or watching if you're a part of my YouTube audience. Now, you know what's coming up next. All the usual. Sign up for my Patreon, share this with friends, family members, coworkers, share it on social media, please. Subscribe to the podcast or follow it on whatever platform you use to listen to or view podcasts. You know the grind. But here's the thing, all of that is really important. Putting this podcast together takes quite a bit of time and effort. I spend about 10 to 15 hours on every episode. Right now, that's just a labor of love. I'm in the process of making changes to improve the podcast and the YouTube channel, but it's slow going. Your support will help me speed up the process and ensure that I can continue with the podcast and offer much more content than what I provide now. As I always like to say, I'm here in the Front Range doing missionary work in regards to religion, spirituality and ecology, psychedelics, and consciousness, and how all of this can help us heal humanity's relationship with a sacred earth. So if you feel moved by the rebel spirit, and I sure hope that you do, then please, by all means, help me in my efforts to share the good news. I'm Nick Mather, and you've been listening to or watching Rebel Spirit Radio. Until next time, may you be in peace, may you flourish in all possible ways, and may you continue to nurture your rebel spirit.